Hey squad, welcome back. Now today's video is just a quick overview and reminder of the fantastic range of virtual synthesizers that come as stock plugins in Logic Pro. These really are some incredibly powerful tools and far too often go completely overlooked. So let's dive in and rediscover some of the power that comes in Logic as standard, and maybe some of these treasures will help to unlock your creativity. So remember, if you're finding value in this video, hit the like button, leave me a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And of course, you can support my channel with a super thanks if you so wish. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so unlike most other top-level digital audio workstations, Logic Pro comes completely packed with a full range of virtual samplers, drum machines, vintage keyboards, orchestral instruments, and of course 10 fantastic virtual synthesizers. And of course all of these are accessible as software instruments. So let's kick things off with the ES1 synthesizer. Right, so here's the ES1 synthesizer. It's a single oscillator, a virtual analog synth, and has all of the key parameters and sections that you'd expect to find on an analog synth. Now this is a bit of a legend actually, because I started using this particular software instrument way back in the early days of Logic when it was owned by eMagic before Logic actually took it over. And this synth was one of the cornerstones of the virtual synth palette in Logic and has been part of the Logic sound set for over 20 years. So that must say something about its quality. For anyone who knows a little bit about synthesizers, this layout is really clear. You've got your waveform selections over here. You've got your filter section, your amplifier, your LFO down here, and your envelopes over here. You've got a whole range of really useful presets to get you started. And this particular synth is great for leads, pads, basses, and other rich virtual analog sounds. Okay, so let's just check out a couple of these presets before we move on to the next synth. Let's start with this Euro cut. Of course, you just work your way through. Let's try out this old school bass. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on any one synth because we don't want this video to go on forever. But just as a reminder, you can add effects plugins to spice things up where needed, and that will add an extra layer of interest to the sounds. So next up, let's look at the ESM FM Synth. Okay, now for the ESM1 Synth. Now this is a very simple, yet again another powerful software instrument based on FM synthesis, which is frequency modulation. Unlike the ES1, which is an analog synth, this one is a digital synth and produces quite different sound textures. Now FM synths are synonymous with bright bell sounding tones as well as deep punchy basses, and I've got the original hardware daddy of them all, the Yamaha DX7, which I use as my main keyboard controller, and I've owned this since 1985. It does take a little while to get your head around how to program an FM synth, but once again Logic has stacked us up with a whole range of presets to get started with. So let's try out this evolving lead. Okay, and how about maybe let's try out one of these basses. Really cool. Okay, so let's move on and let's try out the ESE Ensemble Synth. Now the ESE Ensemble Synth, another really simple synth that can give you results very, very quickly. Look at the layout. We've got here the oscillator section where we can choose our waveforms. Over here, we've got a simple filter section. And over here, we've got a very simple envelope section and amplifier. We've got some chorus and ensemble effects right here. Just real simple. Of course, once again, we've got some presets. So let's start with analog pad. Now, this one in particular is great for pads and those sort of textures. So let's see what we've got. Okay, Now let's switch on maybe the ensemble switch here. Very rich, very smooth, very tasty. And that's just one sound. Let's try a synth brass. Okay, we're keeping it moving, and this time we're going to load up the ESM Monophonic Synth. Now I love the ESM Mono Synth. If you want those deep, dirty basses, this is where you come. The layout again is real simple. You've got an oscillator section here where you can choose between two waveforms. You've got a sawtooth wave here and a rectangular wave, and you can mix between the two using this mix knob. You've got your filter section here, simple cutoff frequency knob and resonance knob here. Here you've got your filter envelope section, simple volume envelope and output section, and you've got some overdrive right here, which is kind of cool. In this drop down is where you adjust your pitch bend settings. So let's just have a quick listen to the default sound. So we've got quite a few basses here. Let's try this plug bass. Okay, moving on, we're going to now pull up the ESP Polyphonic Synth, which is one of my favorites right now. Now this here is an absolute gem, and it represents the emulation of 80s analog synthesis. What we've got here, again, a really simple layout. For any of you who have a general interest or understanding of how a synth is laid out, there are a few basic sections to a synth. You've got the oscillator section where you choose your waveforms. Right here we've got available to us a triangle wave, sawtooth wave, and a rectangular wave, plus a couple of sub-oscillator sliders. And these are used to thicken the tone of the sound because they are set to lower octaves. We've also got a noise generator. Over here is our LFO section. Here's our filter section. This is our filter envelope. Here's our volume envelope, amplifier, and some effects over here. And of course, down the bottom here, we can adjust our pitch bend and overall tuning. As a polyphonic synth, we can play up to 8 voices or up to 8 notes at a time. And once again, we have some great presets to start off with. So let's kick things off with Big Sweep right here. Now have a listen to this. Now, if any of you are into Stranger Things, then you want to start using this synth, because this is right up that alleyway. The sounds on this simple ESP synth can really be molded to emulate the 80s synthwave vibe. So let's pull up one more preset. Let's try this classic octave bass. Again, just dig in, explore, edit, and tune this to your liking. All right, let's move on. Now then, we are going to be dipping into the more complex synths that Logic has to offer. And this one right here is the Evoc 20 Polysynth and Synth Vocoder. And this is the monster right here. So what we've got here is this side represents a polysynthesizer, and this side represents a vocoder. So you can use this as either a polysynth or a vocoder. And if we come up here, we can see here are your synth presets, and here are your vocoder presets and some warped vocoder presets right here. On the synth side of things, we've got 2 modes. We can use this as an FM synth or a dual wavetable synth. And right here is where we choose the different waveforms. We've got up to 50 different waveform shapes that you can choose from. And we can mix between waveform 1 and waveform 2 and mix between them here. I don't want to get too deep into how this actually works. Rest assured that there's a ton you can do with this. And over here, we've got the filter section and the input section for the vocoder. But for now, let's check out what we've got here on the synth. So let's recall the default. Now, one of my favorite presets is the evocative layers, which is this one right here. Really nice. There's a ton we can do with that. We can add additional effects and a whole range of things. But this is definitely one that you want to look into, especially if you are interested in vocoder style tones. Then make sure you explore this one. Okay, let's move on. So like I said, things are becoming more interesting and a little bit more complex as we delve into the retro synth, which is one of the most recent additions to the actual Logic sound palette. And this is it right here. Now the retro synth is extremely powerful. We've actually got 4 different synth engines: an analog engine, a sync engine, wavetable engine, and an FM engine. And for all 4 of these represent different types of synthesis. Now the synth itself is a 16-voice polyphonic synth. And what's great about this plugin is the vast range of presets that it comes with. Leads, pads, basses, and so on. These are great as standalone sounds, but they are very editable as well. So let's pull this one up. So with this antimatter preset, you can see the background has changed, and this background represents FM synthesis. You can see it's highlighted right here. Let's try another one. Now this electric choir represents the wavetable synth. And of course, you can just work your way through. There are just so many sounds to choose from. It really doesn't make sense me going through them, but I would encourage you to take some time and just check out what's under the hood of the retro synth. Okay, let's move on. Next up, we've got the Sculpture modeling synth. Okay, we're getting close to the end, and now Sculpture is one of those beasts that it can seem very overwhelming. Just look at this interface. So many dials and sliders and buttons and sections, and it can be a bit intimidating, but really it's actually quite simple. However, this video is not about how Sculpture works. I'm just giving you an overview of what it actually is. It's an incredibly powerful synth that operates on the physical modeling technology or synthesis, where the architecture is designed to model real-life sounds and instruments using synthesis. Now, the default preset sounds like this. Really rich, interesting sound. And look at all of these presets you've got for basses, pads, keys, bells, and so much. I mean, once again, I'm not going to be going through all of these sounds. There are just far too many for this video. However, I do like the aggressive pluck bass. Take your time, go through the presets, check them out, see how this synth can enhance what you're doing. Switch things up, keep things interesting. Now, let's move on to one of my other favorite synths in Logic, and that will be the ES2 synthesizer. Now, at a first glance, the ES2 synth looks like something out of a futuristic movie. However, once again, it's quite simple in terms of its layout. Really quickly, right here are our oscillators. We have 3 oscillators to play with, which is fantastic. And here we can set the balance between the 3 oscillators. We can select our waveforms, and we can do all of our tuning over here. We've got our glide and analog emulation knob right here. In the middle, we've got 2 filters. Over here, we've got an effects section. Down here, we've got 2 LFOs and 3 envelopes. And in the middle here, we've got our matrix for different types of routing and triggers. Now, it does take a while to get your head around this, but straight off the bat, look at all these presets. Look at all of this. Okay. And I assure you, these presets are brilliant just as they are. You can modify them to your heart's content. You can also add additional effects plugins over here just to create that unique sound for your production. Once again, there are just far too many sounds to demo on this. And of course, if you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you've got Logic on your computer. So why not just pull this synth up and get stuck in? You will not regret it. And finally, we're going to pull up the daddy of them all, Alchemy. Well, of course, I've left the best till last. All of the synths that come in Logic are fantastic and have their place. However, Alchemy is a different kind of beast. In fact, if you spend about $200 or £200 for Logic and all you got was Alchemy, then you'd still be getting value for money. This synth is so massive in terms of its range of sounds. Over here in the preset browser, we've got 3,406 presets, and this is standard stock presets. Also, the way the synth categorizes things so that you can narrow down different types of sounds based on category, we can filter arpeggiated, maybe arpeggiated basses, for dubstep, maybe distorted. And right here, using this fantastic database, we have got 3 options that are suggested based on this search criteria. Down here, we've got all of these vector controls that allow us to modify the sound in real time, and we can even automate this process right here. If we come over to the advanced view, we have up to 4 oscillators at our disposal, along with the filters, modulation, envelopes, plus an arpeggiator, plus onboard effects. This is an absolute giant in terms of synths. So if you decided only to learn about one synth in Logic, it has to be this one. I'm definitely not going to be going through any of these sounds because where do you start? I think I'll be leaving this one up to you and your curiosity. Dive in, explore, try things out. You cannot go wrong. So my final word is take your time, have a look at the synths in Logic, and if you found this video useful, remember, give me a like, subscribe, drop me a comment, and continue to support my content in any which way you can. Until next time, I'm Deuce, I'm out, peace.